All right, thanks everybody for joining us for the City of Courtenay regular council meeting for June 21st. I just want to start by respectfully acknowledging that the land in which we gather is the unceded traditional territories of the Comox First Nation. And on this Indigenous Peoples Day, and with the events that have happened in Kamloops and have been happening across the nation, I'd like to just take the opportunity to have a moment of silence for 1 minute. Thank you. I do see that there's lots of opportunities and time for reflection and learning and growing, and really appreciate the Comox First Nation for their partnership with the City of Courtenay on many projects and working with us to understand their challenges as best we can. With that, I'd like to just give notice that due to the COVID-19 pandemic, in accordance with Ministerial Order M192/2020 and the class order mass gatherings, council meetings will be conducted virtually and live streamed on the City of Courtenay's YouTube channel. And with that, we'll go into the adoption of minutes.
Second.
Excellent. That's been moved and seconded. Are there any errors or omissions? Seeing none, any opposed to adoption? I see no one opposed to adoption. They are unanimously adopted. Thanks very much for that. And introduction of late items. Councillor Courtenay.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I have a draft motion to nominate Councillor McCollum to
Morin.
Councillor Morin.
Sorry. Sorry.
Councillor McCollum was really worried for a minute.
Okay, now you're doing it. Thank you very much, Councillor Morin. Women's participation in Municipal Government Committee of FCM, and if we could have that received as a late item.
Yeah. Okay, that's been seconded. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, anybody opposed to that? Nobody opposed. We will put that on to the late items and we'll come back to it. Councillor Hilly.
Thank you, Mayor. I really appreciate your acknowledgement of Indigenous Peoples Day, but feel obliged to just acknowledge that there are many people who live in the community who are from other than the Comox First Nation. We have Indigenous people from all across the country, and in fact, there are more people of Indigenous heritage who are not part of the Comox First Nation than are. And while we deeply value and respect our relationship with the Comox Nation, we also, I think, want to acknowledge the many Indigenous people that share the community with us on this special day that means a lot to so many of them. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Hilly, and I appreciate that. Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, the motion that was accepted, or the new business, is that under number 11?
It's going to come under number 11.
Thanks.
Yeah, and there was nobody opposed to that, I don't believe. So that was unanimous to pass. And delegations, we do have a motion to vary the agenda. Councillor Hilly. Oh, sorry, Councillor Cole Hamilton, you had your you're ready.
Yeah, no, I have in front of me. So Mayor, I'll move that council bear the order of the June 21st, 2021 regular council agenda, so that item 441 presentation Comox Valley Transit Infrastructure Study is received before item 411 summer meeting schedule 2021.
Second.
Excellent. Thanks very much for that. Are there any questions or comments regarding that? Seeing none, anybody opposed? Nobody's opposed, that's unanimous, and we will vary the agenda and bring that forward right now. And so with that, I'll, if somebody would like to, do we need to move it again, or we moved it by doing the vary? So I'll pass it over to SAO Jeff Garrett.
Thank you. Mayor and Council, we have special guests tonight to give us an overview. Mr. Michael Zabarski from the Courtenay Regional District, Dan Casey from Urban Systems, and James Wadsworth, Project Development Manager, BC Transit. Chris Davidson was going to give us a small introduction to this matter, but I think we'll just proceed as I introduce our guests.
Thanks, Mayor and Council. My name is Mike Zabarski. I'm with Comox 5 Regional District, and as Jeff said, we have Dan Casey from Urban Systems and James Wadsworth from BC Transit here as well. I'll just kick things off and then hand it off to Dan. So just a bit of I guess a background. The Regional District and BC Transit have been really focused on transit service improvements over the last several years, increased frequency, better connections, new routes, those kinds of things. It's been really successful. We've had a 28% increase in ridership over the last 5 years prior to COVID-19. Obviously, last year was not great for ridership. And we're now at a point where the infrastructure that supports the transit system is starting to get in need. It's basically coming up to full. Most of our transit exchanges are at capacity or close. They're not the most efficient for routing. They don't have the best transit amenity or passenger amenities. Some of them are on private property. So that's really motivated us to undertake this study. We worked with BC Transit and hired Urban Systems to do the kind of the grunt work on this study. We did work closely with our partners from all of the municipalities, as well as Ministry of Transportation and BC Transit, of course. It's been a close collaboration with your staff in particular. And we've got a draft report here, which is actually attached to the council agenda. This was presented to the CBRD board very recently. They've directed staff now to approach the councils and seek some feedback from them. And one of the things we're asking for is a letter of support or a motion of support or some kind of approval in principle from council on the general location and concept of the exchanges and transit priority measures that are within your boundaries within the city. Our target is to incorporate any feedback we receive in a final report to be brought back to the board, hopefully this fall. And as you'll hear later in the presentation, ultimately we'd like to proceed with a grant application to build this infrastructure. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dan Casey.
Good, thank you, Mike. Appreciate that. So I'm going to give a little bit of background on the project, the work that was undertaken, and some of the recommendations that are sort of most relevant or most interesting probably to your municipality. You're also more than welcome to leaf through the document that's in the agenda package and ask any questions based on that. And great to see everyone again, by the way. So project background, there are two primary components to the work that was undertaken. One was focused on transit exchanges. The other was on transit priority measures. In terms of what a transit exchange is, it's really a facility that provides for transfer between different routes of transit as well as different travel modes. Some of the key facilities include storage for buses, multimodal transportation facilities, passenger and driver amenities, and supportive land uses and surrounding activities. Transit priority, that refers to targeted interventions to help transit operate more effectively. It helps improve transit performance, and by doing so, increasing the attractiveness of the service and boosting ridership. And really where we focus, and I'll touch on this a little later, but really where transit priority is focused is on areas of congestion and slowdown where transit and bus performance is decreased, and there might be an opportunity to improve on that. A little bit of background. The work that we undertook here was built initially on a 2014 transit future plan, which was created for the entire valley. work in 2017 was undertaken on a frequent transit corridor study. That study confirmed the frequent transit network alignment along Fitzgerald Avenue through Courtenay, as well as Ryan Road and Lerwick and into Comox as well. But of importance, it did confirm the alignment that's shown on the map to the right. And that document also at a high level talked about possible locations for transit exchanges, as well as possible opportunities and locations for transit priority. And so it really did set the stage for the work we've done here. The process that was undertaken included a project working group that included members of each of the local municipalities, including yours. It included membership from BC Transit, the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure, the Comox Valley Regional District, as well as PW Transit, the local transit operator. There were 3 series of meetings and communication that included some kickoff discussions, progress updates near the end of 2020, and then more recently a discussion on key recommendations, as well as helping to formulate priorities or prioritization around some of these improvements. And so now I'll get into some of the key recommendations at a high level at least, and there's a lot more there, and you're more than welcome to explore those. So in terms of transit exchanges, there were 5 locations that were considered through the study. Those locations were South Courtenay, Downtown Courtenay, North Island College, Downtown Comox, as well as Oyster River at the very top end of this system and interfacing with the Campbell River system. For each location, we went through a bit of an exercise in initially identifying a number of possible locations for transit exchanges, and then going through kind of a pros and cons type analysis to get down to a preferred location and then a concept for each. And so I'll touch more specifically on the 3 that are within your boundaries. So South Courtenay, Downtown Courtenay, as well as the North Island College location. So the visuals on the screen are the preferred location and layout for the South Courtenay exchange. So on the diagram on the left is showing 4 bus bays on the west side of Cliff Avenue, immediately in front of the Anfield Center. That's Anfield Road at the south end or the right-hand side of the diagram. And this would be an option that would have no net impact on parking, no impact on traffic on Cliff, and would also provide a good opportunity for pedestrian connection to and from Anfield Center. Part of the rationale here was that this is a public right-of-way, so to get these public transit facilities off of the private site and into a public right-of-way, as well as give room for service and system expansion over time within South Courtenay. With this concept, the diagram on the right-hand side is demonstrating that where the exchange function would happen on Cliff Avenue, there's also where the circle is shown at the entrance to Anfield Center is actually where ons and offs could happen for passengers whose activities might have been related around say the Walmart site or some of the other businesses in there. So in terms of proximity for people walking to and from the bus, there are actually a number of options here, especially as they relate to people who are utilizing the route number 1 or the FTN. Moving next to the preferred location for the Downtown Courtenay exchange. So this location is England Avenue between 6th Street and 8th Street. The former Thrifty Foods site is shown at the bottom of the screen. This site again was selected as preferred after consideration of a number of other possible exchange locations in and around the downtown. This exchange provides for a relatively modest impact on parking. Property right-of-way is already in place, and it provides, maybe importantly, the opportunity for the number 1, the FTN service, to reroute via 8th Street, so Fitzgerald 8th, Cliff, and then over the bridge. And that provides for travel time savings over the current routing, which results in an improved passenger experience, as well as operating cost savings, which are both of great benefit here. And I think moving along to North Island College. So this is a location that would build on current bus stops in this area. Bottom of the screen is the Aquatic Center, top of the screen is the hospital, and then off to the left of the south is the primary portion of the North Island College campus. And so what's being shown is 2 bus bays in either location. They'd be buses in bays completely out of the travel lanes and provide a enhanced experience and more bus storage capacity over current bus stops in that location. So moving over to transit priority, the diagram on the screen here is just giving us the toolbox or the menu of possible transit priority interventions. So on the more modest side of things, interventions at the signal or intersection level, and opportunities that are of a greater level of significance and generally in cost and impact are dedicated bus lanes or fully dedicated segregated bus right-of-ways. And so generally here we're dealing with sort of interventions that are in the middle of this scale, but consideration really was given to the full scale of possible improvements. So a couple locations specifically that were identified that are both of importance regionally, but also within the city itself. The diagram on the right, the location is Ryan Road, where it meets Old Island Highway. The Lewis Center is at the top of the diagram. And so what's being shown is the addition of another travel lane on the Ryan Road leg of the intersection that would accommodate storage for at least 2 buses. Would allow buses to skip vehicle queues, occupy the lane, and then they'd be given time before the signal goes green for the bus to sneak through. And what's kind of interesting and timely about this is a version of this is in place right now associated with traffic management around 5th Street Bridge. And so the success or the benefit that treatment has provided today or the last little while is sort of a sneak peek or an indicator of what this could look like at this location more permanent as part of a longer term solution. The diagram to the left or in the center of the screen is the location is Old Island Highway at Comox Road. So immediately east or outbound from 5th Street Bridge. And what this diagram is showing is taking advantage of quite a long right turn lane that terminates at Comox Road and using that as an opportunity to still facilitate that right turn, but also allow buses to travel up the corridor out of the through vehicle queue, and again give them the chance to jump the green light at the signalized intersection and proceed through more quickly. And then a longer term item that was also been identified is dedicated bus lanes through some of the most congested corridor within the region. And so that being Old Island Highway and Ryan Road, generally speaking, between the foot of the 5th Street Bridge, Old Island Highway up to Ryan Road to beyond Back Road as you start to climb the hill toward the college and beyond. And so the cross section on the right hand side is showing what that could look like. And the goal really, and this is a very long-term initiative that'll take time to obviously develop funding to support, as well as to assemble additional right-of-way width to achieve. But the goal would be to actually have no net impact on traffic conditions, and rather you would be adding another lane outside of the current lanes that buses would occupy, dedicated bus lanes where buses would travel. And so they wouldn't be subjected to congestion and queuing in the general vehicle lanes, but also by providing their own lane, you wouldn't actually be tangibly impacting traffic conditions. So that's what's been shown here at a conceptual level. So those are the key recommendations, key conclusions from the study. We did also want to touch on some of the recommended next steps. And so I'll walk us through the first piece here, and then I think James from BC Transit will take over after that. And so in the summary to the study, some ordering of project priority were developed. And the idea being this represents the list of both projects. Well, we bucketed them into short-term, medium-term, long-term, and they represent how important and how, we'll say, constructible each of these projects might be. And so in descending order, I guess, South Courtenay Exchange was identified as basically as highest priority, as well as the Ryan Road Old Island Highway QJump, and then also the downtown Courtenay Exchange. Now, recognizing with that location that through our discussions with city staff, with downtown BIA, there was a feeling that perhaps more planning might be needed around how buses might route in and out of that location, and potential reconfiguration based on that. So the suggestion is that further planning and design is taken on as a short-term action item, and then getting to this kind of medium-term timeframe. Well, then you'd move toward actually building that exchange location, the Oyster River location, as well as the second QJump location I talked about, and then the remaining exchanges, the remaining transit priority locations, as well as opportunities for signal priority, very basic improvements. So with all of this, what we actually heard, which was quite neat at regional board meeting a little over a month ago, was some comments around rather than lumping things into long or even medium, is there a chance to move some of these items up to have more higher priority or more short-term items? And so it was kind of neat, and from my perspective, encouraging to receive that feedback as well. So I think from that, I'm going to turn it over to James Wadsworth from BC Transit to walk us through what advancing one or a package of these projects may look like.
Thank you, Dan. And I think, as maybe Mike has said before, we're moving from the vision of the Transit Future Plan and the corridor plan to try to move to a place where we can build transit exchanges with the Comox Regional District and the town of Courtenay. And the next step along the way, we've done the options and identified the leading options, and it is to select preferred options. And this is where we asked local governments to provide us approval in principle. And we're asking for approval in principle, not as a complete sign off on the project, but enough approval that we could go forward and develop a business case and funding application to the federal government for Investment Canada funding. And right now, the federal government has a sale on transit where we can get the local government share down to 20%, where regularly local government is paying 50% of these costs. So we think it's a great opportunity to take advantage of. And that would be the next step, would be getting approval in principle from both the Comox Regional District and the local governments. And then if that was to occur and we had a successful application, then we would again do more work with you, where there would be more project planning, some public engagement, and ultimately we'd like to sign a project agreement so we can build something. So that's my presentation here. Next slide. And so I think now is the chance for some questions and answers.
Excellent. Thanks very much for that presentation. And I'm going to pass it over to Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. And can you guys hear me okay?
Yep.
Yeah, they're nodding. Okay. Yeah, thanks for the presentation. Certainly exciting and interesting from my perspective. So I have a bunch of questions, but I'll split them up for you. Firstly, I guess the local portion would be funded by the regional district through the regular cost sharing plan we have.
Yeah, that's correct. We would have at the regional district, we have an annual operating agreement, and these costs would get added to that as a kind of a lease fee on the infrastructure over the life of the infrastructure. And then obviously the city and other municipalities would pay as they normally do for transit through the regional district.
Yeah. And then I noticed the Oyster River on there. I can't remember if you actually talked about it in detail, but is that sort of a collaboration between the Strathcona Regional District and the Comox Valley Regional District?
It will be, yeah. It's and also the Ministry of Transportation. It's actually within their road right away, and then because of the nature of the Campbell River Transit Service, would probably involve the city of Campbell River as well. They're the kind of the local government up there that's responsible for transit. So we would work closely with them to make sure that those that design is consistent with their plans too.
Right. And I didn't notice anything mentioned about covered waiting areas, but maybe I missed that as well. Is there plans to beef those up, especially at those exchanges?
So the transit exchange design includes bus shelters at all of the locations. I think actually more than one bus shelter at each location.
Yeah, I think what's not shown in these concept designs is that level of detail. There would be a full level of passenger amenities, whether that's the bus shelters, benches, garbage cans, bike racks, lighting, landscaping, all of the nice things. We really want to build these things properly and encourage people to use transit.
Yeah, sounds good. May I ask a few more? I don't know
Yeah.
if there's anyone. Okay, I had a thought about shared bus and bicycle lanes, which I've experienced in Paris, France, actually. And I noticed some of the places we're looking at priority lanes are actually some of our cycling lanes. So I don't know if you're aware of that. In our cycling network plan, we identify the Old Island Highway as sort of a route for cycling, our cycling network. So I would assume at some point we're interested in fitting some stuff in there as well. Have you guys given that any thought?
I think there is absolutely potential for those sorts of treatments. I think for each corridor, there would need to be sort of a specific investigation to figure out, right of way that's available, what might fit, whether sharing bus bike facilities is the right thing to do for both user groups, or whether something that's separate might make more sense. So I think absolutely we thought about it, and I think it's something that, like, as these projects progress should be investigated in another level of detail.
Okay.
I will add too that the current priority lane that's in place for the Fifth Street Bridge project, we are sharing that with bikes, and we haven't ran over too many of them, so I think it works pretty well.
Sounds like a win.
I think preference is to have a 3-meter bus lane with a 1.5 meter painted bike lane. That would be perfect, and maybe even a little bit wider if you've got a higher standard than that.
Okay, excellent, thanks. And then I guess it sounds like Courtenay staff have been involved in your process a little bit, and would be even more so going forward.
Yeah, we had, they were one of the groups that was represented in our working group. But then beyond that, we actually had some other specific conversations on facilities like South Courtenay Exchange and Downtown Courtenay Exchange, and so there was some pretty good communication along the way.
That's great. Who is in your working group from Courtenay?
It was your Kyle Shaw, your public works director.
Okay,
he was great.
We did also meet with the planning staff, specifically around the downtown Courtenay locations. As part of the OCP work, there was some interest in reviewing those transit exchanges, and we worked with the planning staff from the city on that one.
Thanks so much, guys. Appreciate it.
Excellent. And next we have Councillor Cole Hamilton.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for all three of you for this. I saw the presentation at the regional district and had just a couple of follow-up questions. I mean, I like the idea of advancing the timeline, especially you don't often get an 80% off sale on infrastructure, so that's something to strongly consider. At the RD, I asked about the signal priorities, which are 50,000 a piece, and they seem to be sort of an inexpensive piece to implement. And I think, Dan, you said that you calculated the relative savings of time and or traffic flow for each of them, and they didn't necessarily merit being moved forward. I was curious, if we were to concentrate the timeline on these projects, which ones would you see as the priorities to be moved forward in time?
It's a good question. I think off the top of my head, I honestly don't know for certain. I think our intent with those was when signal work was being done. So whether it's an intersection redesign or whether it's upgrade or improvement on aged signal infrastructure, that would be a really good time to do it. It's also worth understanding and acknowledging that like what the treatment would be is to hold, it's on Fitzgerald or on Ryan, the major bus corridors, is to hold the green time longer if a bus is approaching so that it can clear that intersection. And that does result in, and we're talking, you can set those thresholds. It can be a few seconds, it can be 10 seconds, whatever it might be. It does result in a little more delay on the side streets because they sit red while the green light is held for the bus. And so it's not a perfect solution, but it is something that can be done in the absence of enough space to do a full queue jump lane, or where the congestion or delay is not terribly significant.
So it sounds like we need to talk further before any sort of reprioritization could take place in any substantial way. That's not something that your report contemplated was.
Sorry to cut you off there. We could get back to you on that. We have that information. We could circle back on that.
I think in a perfect world, we would make one application for all of the transit exchanges and the two shorter term transit priority options that are look more like a painting project, and maybe some signal upgrades. And then I think the very long term option of Ryan Road would probably be best to go into future planning documents that the city has, and then be looking at it from a long term strategic point of view.
Great. I just want to clarify. So you're saying all transit exchanges, I guess the two queue jumper lanes are already kind of roughly painted in, and then consider beyond that in terms of if you were to just take a sort of a first pass on what the speeding of the timeline would look like. Okay, great. Thanks for clarifying that, James.
Excellent. Thanks very much for that. And Councillor McCollum.
Thanks, Mayor, and thanks for the report. Yeah, I had some questions just around the prioritizing of the South Exchange in the short term versus the downtown one in the long term. And I'm curious to know if that prioritizing is more to do with the complexity of each option, or is it more to do with the benefit of relocating that South Exchange sooner? Just because reading through the report, it seemed to me that there was a lot of benefits in moving the downtown exchange to England. And I'm just curious to understand what the what the improvements are of moving that south one, because it does seem like that one actually does have some trade-offs in terms of pedestrian access to the shopping. And if that one's identified because it's a little bit easier to implement, or if it is in fact a higher priority to the service that we're delivering right now.
Yeah, I would say the prioritization behind that, it did, both South Courtenay and downtown Courtenay emerged as like 1A and 1B, the two highest priority of the 5 that were investigated. I think the feeling was that the South Courtenay location could be achieved, it's ready to go, could be achieved more easily or more quickly, versus there's probably still a bit of thinking and planning work involved. And I would actually say, most importantly, engagement and dialogue with downtown business, with adjacent property owners. And so that's where that one, it's not unimportant at all. It's quite the opposite. But the feeling was there's a little bit more work to be done before that is, ready to go and we have the option to move forward with.
Okay, that was kind of my sense of it as well. I'm wondering if at this point in time you can comment at all about some of the concerns that need to be addressed with the downtown one. I looked at the alternative one where there's some diagrams for a turnaround, and I wasn't totally clear if that's a suggestion or a possible solution due to buses on 6, or if there's more issues that I missed that were perhaps raised by stakeholders in that area.
Yeah, I'm happy to elaborate on that. I think, so the concern really, the biggest concern was around bus circulation, some of the more narrow streets in the vicinity, and specifically 6th Street and 6th Street in Fitzgerald intersection, 6th Street in England intersection, which would both have the need for, depending on which bus is coming from which or going to which direction, the right turns become very challenging. And so there's sort of this trade-off between well, you could adjust the curbs and make them wider and more sweeping, but really that's sort of not necessarily in keeping with what you want for your pedestrian oriented downtown. There's also some 6th Street being the identified cycling corridor, and connection down to bridges and connections up to Fitzgerald, which is a key corridor. And so there's still some discussion to be had around how to safely and comfortably design that corridor to accommodate both the bikes, the people on bikes and the buses. And so I think that's where and your staff have been really awesome and helped sort of give us some guidance and some direction on this piece as we went along. I think the other thing we did, and I believe, Mike, you were there in person, was worked with PW Transit, the operator, to test some buses moving through some of those locations, and it's doable, but it's tight.
Yeah, we did take a bus through those roads, and as you mentioned, Dan, there's some pretty tight turns. It was quite challenging getting from 6th onto Fitzgerald. There's a lot of through traffic on Fitzgerald. There's a pedestrian crossing there, and trying to kind of get out into onto the flow of traffic on Fitzgerald took a while to wait for a gap. So these are things I think that are important to do a little bit more homework on before we kind of commit to how that transit exchange would exactly work. And that, I believe, is why we had an alternative design where there was a kind of essentially a big bulb turnaround at the end of 6th, at the end of England at 6th. So we didn't have to go up 6th. So some more work on those ones required.
That's great. That's really good to understand. Thanks for the answers.
Excellent. Thanks for the questions. Councillor Killian.
Thank you, Mayor, and thanks for the presentation. As you probably know, every time changes are made to the transit system, we have users who are used to a certain pattern who are disrupted in some way. And of course, we've seen significant changes in the system over the years, and for the most part, the improvements make sense. And I'm just wondering if you can give a really brief summary of what sort of increased ridership you expect these improvements to make based on the improvements to timing and the facilities and the buses in general. If you could comment on the where we're going in terms of modal share and how these improvements will contribute to that increase.
I can kind of start that one, and maybe James or somebody can chime in. I think it's tough to say, a quantifiable number of increased rides or mode share that would come with these specific improvements, but we definitely know that they will have an increase, in riding and mode shares, especially the transit priority measures. So having those bus lanes and those queue jumper lanes just makes transit a more effective, more attractive option. Quicker trip, bypasses traffic. It just shows that that's a preferred mode over single occupant vehicles, for example. And those are the ones that really start to make transit really attractive to people. And obviously having nicer transit exchanges really does help attract people as well, whether it's, the nice bus shelters and landscaping and all those other amenities. The more efficient routing with some of these locations, again, it's just that better trip time, doesn't feel as circuitous. So we're just trying to build a more attractive transit system for people. And the other thing that these things do is they allow us to make investments in expansion of the transit service. So we're at capacity at some of our transit exchanges, which means we really can't add any more frequency of service to those locations. So, by having this infrastructure, we're able to keep going and keep expanding and improving on the transit system. I think it'd be really hard to say exactly what kind of a increase we get to, and I'll maybe see if James or Dan has any suggestions on that.
Yeah, I think Mike's hit on the key point is the facilities allow us the ability to add service expansion. So I think the goal of the frequent transit network is to get to running 15 minutes or better all day long. And when you have those levels of service, you start to attract choice riders to the system, people that could choose to drive because the service level is getting getting high enough. So you'd start to see, you could see, I think today we have about 1,500 people on the primary route in town. You'd start to see 2,000 or 2,500 people a day. And it's all about creating the facility that supports the service level. And Mike also mentioned that when you start to make those transit priority investments, again, it's another way of reducing travel time. You're going to attract more choice riders. So it's hard to quantify exactly, but they're all investments that are moving you in the right direction of where your mode share goals ought to be.
That's great. And of course, the region and the city and all of our citizens are interested in a better transit system, both to get people out of their cars and impact our climate change goals, as well as to enhance mobility around the city for many people who depend on it. So I really appreciate the specifics of what difference the improvements will make. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Councillor Hilling. And I don't think I see any other questions. I do just want to note that, you know, I recall the discussions around that frequent transit network many years ago when I was on the regional district, and really glad to see that has resulted in that 28% increase in ridership. I think those numbers, I can't remember the exact numbers back at the time, but that does seem to be kind of in line or possibly even more than what was discussed. I'm not too sure. I guess one thing that I'm wondering is there was that 20% would become local government costs, which obviously sounds great instead of 50%. But what numbers do you think would be talking about, and how would that also impact the sustainability or those long-term O&M, you know, as we have to actually do, you know, asset management, et cetera?
Yeah, we did look at that, what the annual kind of cost of the regional district would be, and we just took the whole list of all the projects, so all the exchanges, including in Comox and Oyster River, et cetera. And when you break it down on that 20% funding basis over, I think it was a 12 or 15 year lifespan of the infrastructure, it was about 100 to 125 grand a year additional to the regional district. And so obviously Courtenay's, you know, a portion of that, and Comox and everybody else. So it sounds quite affordable to me anyway, when I look at it like that, when we're talking about, you know, literally millions of dollars of infrastructure. And then as far as asset management and O&M goes, you know, those are things we really do need to work out a little bit later in the process once we get into the exact, you know, design process. And that would be something that we would talk with the city about as far as how the city might want to be involved with asset management or operations, or maybe they don't want to be involved at all. And, you know, being regional infrastructure, I think the regional district would be essentially responsible for it. And, you know, whether we contract back to the city to do the work or how that works, I'm not sure, but those are things we do need to look at a little bit later on for sure.
Okay, thanks for that. I do appreciate it. And again, I don't see any questions or comments. So with that, anybody opposed to receipt of the presentation? Nobody's opposed. That passes unanimously. And I do recall you saying that there was the request was maybe a letter of support. Was that correct, Mike?
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly how the city likes to deal with these things, but some kind of level of support, so that we know we're on the right track with, you know, with the location and a little bit of the concept, so that we can make those grant applications. So whether that's a letter of support or a motion from council, I'll kind of leave that up to the city on how they'd like to handle that, but definitely something that indicates that we're on the right track.
Excellent. And the deadline that you would want that by?
We're kind of hoping to get the report finalized for, say, September. So, you know, it'd be nice to have something by then.
Okay. And our CAO, Jeff Garbutt, had a comment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through the delegation. Staff have worked pretty closely on this. We do need to understand the implications. I did sit in on the regional district board discussion on this, which talked about the big picture, and there was some commentary about accessibility and distance changes for services, et cetera. So we'll have staff connect and come forward with some discussions. I would note that these are over the lifespan of the contemplated improvements. To go to direction from council, like could we accelerate? Some of it will definitely be development driven, and where we have some opportunity to look at development informed improvements, we certainly would do that. But I really appreciate the opportunity for regional district staff and their consultants to come and talk about specifics for us. And it's really important as the central community inside our transit system, and it's a huge component of both the regional growth strategy, the regional sustainability strategy, and will be a big part of our community plan. So really appreciate it.
Excellent. So I'll take from that that's going to come back through the natural processes. So that's great. And yeah, no, this is fantastic. And I think, the one thing I know when we did the frequent transit corridor transition years ago was those people that was mentioned who had really become accustomed to the existing schedule, and how that transition caused a little bit of ruffled feathers, I'd say, for a little bit as people got used to the new system. But again, to see that increase in ridership, I think really is the proof in the pudding, so to speak, that those decisions are paying off now. So and with that, I'll say thanks so much for your presentation today, and we'll let you guys take off. You don't have to watch the rest of the meeting if you don't want to.
Thanks for your time.
All right. And with that, we'll get back to a regularly scheduled thing with legislative services and our summer meeting schedule. And somebody like to move that? Or we can just have the discussion and then move something later.
Mayor,
Yes, Councillor Hill.
I'll move that based on the June 7th, 2021 staff report, summer meeting schedule 2021, council approve option 1 and cancel the following regularly scheduled meetings: August 3rd, August 16th, and August 31st. And that a regular council meeting be scheduled on July 26th, 2021 in place of the July 26th, 2021 committee of the whole meeting.
Second.
All right, that's been moved and seconded. Thanks very much for that, Councillor Hillian. And I'll pass it over to our CEO, Jeff Corbett.
Thank you, through Mayor to Council. There was a staff report in front of you that contemplates a summer meeting schedule. Beginning in 2001, we've historically passed a resolution to reduce the number of meetings during the month of July and August. Since that time, this reduced schedule has been recommended and implemented annually with no issues related to reduction in city services identified to date. Under the current schedule pursuant to Council Procedure Bylaw 2730/2013, there are 2 council meetings and 1 committee of the whole meeting per month, with the exception of December. The proposed amendments in front of council vary from the previous years as they seek to better meet operational needs of the community, acknowledge and mitigate the efficiency impacts of availability in August, and concentrate work in an efficient manner. We have an amended schedule in front of you that we would consider a pilot, and we'd work with council to look at a total schedule for 2021. We have heard that this is a bit challenging, and pursuant to our bylaw, that's the right thing to do. So staff are available, and I think it would be important for us to plan out the year as a total entity. We have a staff recommendation on page 15 of the agenda.
Excellent. That's fantastic. And all right, and it sounds like the recommendation has been first and seconded. And I know I've been talking about having that fulsome schedule in December for the following year, rather than modifying it as you go through the year, so that council can better plan our lives, so to speak. And the only other thing is that as with any emergencies, if we had to have an emergency council meeting, that would still be available to us for any high priority items that we are unforeseen at this point in time. So with that, I will poll council. I feel weird doing this. Actually, I'll just Councilor hands. Yeah.
Thanks, Mayor. I certainly support the motion, particularly given the stressful year, 14 months that staff have been through. I think slowing things down in the month of August makes total sense. In saying that, though, I have to state for the record that I won't be available for those last 2 meetings in July. And so you won't have the pleasure of my company, and who knows, that might make those meetings faster too.
Yeah, and I think as we articulate things going into the next month or so, we'll figure that out. Who knows, maybe I'll follow your lead and take those off as well. But I think that this is certainly something that isn't out of order for things that we've done in the past. So with that, show of hands, those in favor. Any opposed? And that passes. Sorry, that's the first time. It's been a long time, so appreciate you guys being patient with me. With that, let's move on to the next remedial action for 1655 20th Street.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Oh, do we need to move in second, or are we going to do a discussion?
Move receipt.
Move receipt.
Second.
That's been moved and seconded, so on receipt. Thanks, CAO.
Thank you, through Mayor and Council. Mr. Buck is here to do a short presentation on the matter in front of you.
Thanks very much through the mayor to council. I believe everybody is well aware of the subject property at 1655 20th Street. It's been a long-standing issue for the city related to bylaw enforcement. Specific to this order, which is really related to the safety of the building. So the health and safety related to the occupants of the building and the structure itself. On March 4th, there was a RCMP action at the property, which was attended by both building and fire staff from the city. And during that walkthrough, it was noted that the dwelling had been converted from what it was originally constructed for as a single family home to a number of more, I guess the best term would be boarding suites, as well as a secondary suite in the building. So subsequent to that visit, the owner was issued a letter by the manager of building and administrative services, identifying that there were safety issues with the building, and what we refer to as a no occupancy notice was posted on the building. A letter was sent the subsequent day to the property owner, requesting that they secure the building, so board it up and bring it up to building code and provincial building regulations. To this date, those requirements haven't been satisfied. And subsequently in early May, there was a call from general public advising that the chimney of the building was being removed. Building inspection services attended the site, identified that yes, there was modifications being made, and a building permit hadn't been obtained. So again, on May 13th, a letter was sent to the property owner advising them that the site needed to be secured in line with city bylaws and provincial building regulations, as it was becoming a demolition site. And again, to date, no action has been taken by the owner in that regard. So we're at a point today where we seem to have an unwilling property owner, and under the provisions of the community charter, council's entitled to issue what's called the remedial action requirement. And the resolution that's before you sets out specific recommendations. It compels the owner to abide by those within 30 days, and failure to do so then gives the city the authority to take that action at the owner's expense. And then the monies that the city would expend to undertake that work would be a debt owing by the property owner. And that then becomes part of the taxes that are on the property. And alternatively, the community charter provides a provision that the city could sell the property, recoup our fees from the sale proceeds, and then return the remainder to the property owner. So we're at a point that we're really hoping this gives the owner motivation to undertake the works that are required. And the specific requirements that we've outlined is that the building's not to be moved from the site because it doesn't meet code requirements and is a safety hazard at this point. That they secure the building and bring it up to code, or that they demolish it and remove it from the site. And again, within 30 days. I do have Trevor Sweeney, the manager of building administrative services here, if there's any specific questions on the safety aspects. But we did include in the report the letters that have been written to the owner outlining those requirements. And be happy to take any questions.
All right, thanks. And Councillor Hilling.
Thank you, Mayor, and thanks very much to staff for the report. This is fairly significant and dramatic action on the part of the city that is proposed, and there may be some people who don't necessarily understand the gravity of why we would be brought to this. So I'm just wondering if our building inspector could perhaps detail what the health and safety conditions actually are within the property that bring us to contemplating this serious action.
Yes, thank you. Through CAO to Mayor and Council. When we attended the site for the original investigation after the RCMP were in there, the house had been originally constructed as a single family dwelling, and then it has subsequently been converted to a de facto boarding house. Most of the rooms, including the living room, other rooms that wouldn't have been designated as bedrooms, have been cordoned off into bedrooms, locked from the rest of the building. And there's also what we would define as a secondary suite in a partial portion of the basement as well. None of this was done with permits. There's no fire separations in between. There wouldn't be proper heating, not necessarily proper ventilation. Some of the other problems were some of the areas that were used for sleeping or bedrooms don't have a secondary means of egress, like a bedroom window, those types of things. So I mean, the building's in general state of disrepair. There's some other safety items, handrails, stuff like that aren't there as well. But the big ones are the fire separations for the different units that have been created.
So effectively, a fire in that building could result in significant injury or loss of life from lack of ability of people to get out of the sleeping accommodation that they might be in.
That is correct.
Thanks very much. Appreciate that.
Excellent, thanks very much. And I did see Chief Bardonix, you turned your video on. Did you want to make a comment as well?
Yeah, the one thing with the first inspection that building and fire went to was of such condition and unsafe for our firefighters to take action on, that we've put a status of exterior attack only on the building. If we needed to get access to a particular room from the outside, we'd cut a hole in the wall.
Wow. And just for clarification, is that the sort of the first time you've had to do something like that?
That would be a first for us, yes.
Okay, so that's pretty extreme. Thanks so much, Chief Bardonix, for your input. I really appreciate it. Councillor Moore.
Great, thank you, Mayor. I would suspect that probably there's electrical issues as well in the building that wasn't mentioned, but that would cause some hazards, I'm assuming. Is that another issue, that there's been some electrical work not done to code, or?
Thanks for the question. Yeah, very likely. It's provincially regulated here in Courtenay, so we didn't do any actual direct investigation on modifications to the electrical.
Right. Okay, that actually wasn't my main question, but I just thought of it when Councillor Hilling was talking. In terms of the fines and the charges, it's my understanding that when a regular person is delinquent on their taxes, it takes some time before there would be a sale of a property, that kind of thing. But in this situation, it sounds like this is a special action that would enable the city to move on this much more quickly. I'm just wondering if staff could outline the criteria for that, or explain that.
Yes, thanks very much. It's something that would be more of a last resort if we were unable to recoup the fees. But under Section 80 of the Community Charter, it does provide specific provisions separate from a tax sale, where you're a whole different process around that. But that enables the city to undertake that sale and then recoup our costs and return the remainder of those proceeds to the owner. So we're not recovering the full costs, not recovering the full value of the property, just covering our costs.
Great, thank you.
And Chief Bardonix, I just saw you took yourself off mute again. Did you have another bit to put in regarding the electrical?
No, our biggest concerns were needles, conditions, health hazards. Just, it's quite a danger for first responders to enter the building.
Thanks so much. And Councillor Hillian.
Thanks, Mayor. I'm certainly prepared to move the recommendation if you see it as being timely.
Yeah, anybody opposed to receipt? See nobody opposed to receipt, I'll pass it back to you, Councillor Hillian.
Thank you, Mayor. I move that based on the June 21st, 2021 staff report, remedial action 1655 20th Street and pursuant to Division 12 of Part 3 of the Community Charter, Council hereby resolves that 1, the building located at 1655 20th Street, Courtenay, British Columbia, legally described as parcel C, DD 401141 of Lot B, District Lot 230, Comox District Plan 12188, PID 004982312 is considered to be in or creating an unsafe condition. And 2, the owner of the building is hereby ordered to take the following remedial action within 30 days of the receipt of notice of this order. A, not relocate the building from the property, and B, board it up so as to prevent entry and occupancy of the building and bring it up to requirements of the provincial building regulations and the city's building bylaw, or C, demolish and remove the building and contents in their entirety located on the property. And be it further resolved that the Director of Development Services of the City of Courtenay be and is hereby authorized in default of such remedial measures being undertaken by the owner to carry out or have such work carried out and the expense charged to the owner. If unpaid on December 31st in the year in which the works are done, the expense should be added to and form part of the taxes to be paid on the real property as taxes in arrears or be collected as a debt.
Second.
And that's been seconded by Councillor McCollum. Any further questions or comments? Councillor Hillian?
Thank you, Mary. I just want to acknowledge that this has taken an incredible amount of work and time on behalf of our staff. As we recognized when we took the previous remedial action on this property, not only has this been a concern for the city staff and the police bylaw officers, but it's been a huge drain on the neighbors and the people who live nearby. I do appreciate that there are people living in this property, and I know that our staff are reaching out to try and make arrangements for alternatives for those folks should this action take place. But I think what we've heard tonight are significant health and safety concerns that we simply cannot stand idly by and allow to continue. We hear well, perhaps I'll end it there, but I just want to acknowledge and thank staff for bringing this forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Hillian. And I think that is something that, you know, has been a burden on that neighborhood for sure for far too long. And I know not just myself, but all of council, I think, has been inundated with messages and meetings and discussions, and of course, feeling the utmost empathy for the folks in that neighborhood and feeling that it's been a very difficult situation. So just to echo your thanks to staff for really working hard and diligently on this. And I believe months ago, it was at the 1,000-hour mark in terms of hours that our staff had already committed to this. And really, we just add to those hours between then and now. And so this is a very significant, very serious situation. I do appreciate everybody who's been involved with it. And with that, Councillor Moore.
Thanks, Mayor. I just want to emphasize that I think our council also has a lot of empathy for the people in that building. I know Councillor Hillian mentioned it, but we are, we've been talking a lot about the neighbors, but no one should have to live in these kind of conditions. And we're hoping that some of these folks, if not all of them, will be able to connect with some services to get them proper housing that's not dangerous. People are in desperate situations often, and sometimes think that just a roof over the head is enough. But as we've heard tonight, there's significant risk to the people living in that building. Even just from the chimney that was being knocked down and bricks falling inside the building, etc. That's just one instance. So I think that I just want to stress that I believe our council is very empathetic to people inside the building, and wish that they had a proper place to live that was safe and secure, and a healthy environment for them. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Councilor Moore. I do appreciate that. And I see lots of nodding heads here from your fellow councilors. So I do appreciate that. With that, I will ask all those in favor of the motion. Any opposed? And that passes unanimously. Next on our agenda is the Financial Information Act, the Sophie Statement of Financial Information.
Move receipt.
Excellent. And it's been moved and seconded. I'll pass it over to staff. Mr. Carver.
Thank you. Ms. Nelson is available to introduce this report. She'll do the short presentation.
Okay, thank you. Through the CAO to Mayor and Council. So the report we're presenting to you today is the 2020 Statement of Financial Information, also known as the SOFI. This is a statutory report that all municipalities in BC must prepare each year, and it needs to be approved by Council by June 30th. So once approved, we will send it to the province. And just to note that most of this report you have seen before up until about it's page 61 of your agenda is the audited financial statements, which you have already seen and approved. So with that, I'll leave it open to any questions. Thank you.
Thanks so much. And I don't believe there's any information. I know this is just, Councillor.
I was just going to move the motion.
Oh. Okay. Councillor McCollum.
You want to dispose of receipt?
Yeah, I'll assume anybody opposed to receipt. Seeing none, Councillor McCollum.
Thanks, Mayor. I'll move that based on the June 21st staff report, Financial Information Act 2020 Statement of Financial Information, Council approve option 1 and approve the City of Courtenay Statement of Financial Information for the year ended December 31st, 2020.
Second.
Excellent. And we've had a brief discussion on that. I don't see any further questions or comments. Oh, Councillor Hilling.
Thanks, Mayor. I think there's a lot of information in this report that will be of interest to our citizens, including the what people actually make who work for the senior positions with the organization, council salary, that type of thing. But primarily, I wanted to just acknowledge the hard work of the finance department through this season and in preparing all of these reports as required to assure that the city's finances are in good order. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Hilling. I appreciate that. And with that, all those in favor of the motion? Any opposed? And that passes unanimously. We already had the presentation on transit, so that brings us up to the Union of BC Municipalities Appointment Book. Next one, we'd like to just move receipt.
Receipt.
Second. Excellent. And I'll pass it over to Mr. Jeff Garvin.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So just the next item on our agenda, we've identified an item that we'd like to recommend meetings to support future grants with a very important capital project with the city. And we're at Council's pleasure in terms of any direction on requests for meetings.
Excellent. And I know one of the ones that I was hoping to maybe to add to this might be the Minister of Finance. And that would be to discuss the potential of tax sharing revenues on provincial sales tax, liquor tax, property transfer tax, the potential implementation of a fuel tax. And there's another tax in there that I've lost. In
Cannabis.
Cannabis, yeah, sharing cannabis, but the cannabis sharing, there's already a working group on, whereas the other ones there isn't. But I do appreciate that, Councillor Theos. And I've lost the last one, but there's a briefing note that we have from our last meeting, and basically be going back and the purpose is basically we're taking on a lot more, lots being downloaded to municipalities in terms of social services and otherwise. And so it's just fair to provide some extra revenue to allow us to actually provide those services properly beyond the property taxes that we receive. And then the other one that might be, it's actually, I believe, going to be later on in my notice of motion, but a meeting with Minister Dix, the Minister of Health, basically to talk about the health and safety of our constituents, and basically the new cancer, or not cancer, sorry, cardiac center in Nanaimo. And with that, I will pass it over. Councillor Hillier.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just wondering if our staff have had any contact with the other local governments to learn what they might be planning to present. There are some, I think, focusing on infrastructure needs makes a lot of sense for us at this point. But there may be some larger issues affecting the region that are being addressed, and it would be useful to know what perhaps the regional district is taking forward for the other municipalities that we share the valley.
Thanks, Councillor Hillian, and I'll pass over to Mr. Garber.
Thank you. Through the mayor to Councillor Hillian. At this point, through our CAO's discussions, we haven't identified any other issues. On the capital projects front, there was significant grants and discussions through the regional district, but we'll certainly, I think it's important to court these asks, and if we have similar concerns, I think pooling requests potentially would also be appropriate. So we'll thank you for that direction, and we'll carry on with that discussion.
Excellent, thanks very much. And next is Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I was thinking about possibly BC housing. I don't know if that's come up on staff's radar, but we all obviously have that application going for a cooperative project, and maybe touching base with the appropriate ministry or BC housing directly would be worthwhile. I'd certainly take that meeting.
Excellent. Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And we've had, I think, 2 or 3 meetings with BC Housing since that announcement. But the more the merrier, so to speak, because we really want to make sure that we're front of the line for any of those things. So thanks for that. And Councillor Warren.
Great, thank you, Mayor. I know we've talked about this in the past. These meetings are very short. And often, we're sort of putting in an extra rallying cry for funding or whatever. But I do think many of the issues that we're facing, social issues, are related to addiction and mental health. And certainly we've seen some movement, which I appreciate, but it's not enough. I mean, we don't have access to detox for people in a timely fashion. Our agencies in town are completely overwhelmed. They're doing a fantastic job. They're doing the best they can. I know that our local substance use committee is trying to work on some policy and advocacy for many of these things. They need our support, and I really think that it's important for us to meet with the Minister for Addiction and Mental Health and really push for some of those local services to happen immediately, particularly around getting people into detox and into treatment beds that don't cost $20,000 a month for people. I think we really have to push the envelope there. People are getting burned out, people are dying, and things are just getting worse and worse in terms of vulnerable people suffering. So if I can put the plug in for that would be great.
And Councillor Moore, just to clarify, would you think that'd be because there's the Ministry of Mental Health and Addictions now? So you thinking that ministry in particular?
Yeah, sorry, maybe I misspoke that. That's
No. I just want to make sure because I think that really plays in well, because we're going to be possibly meeting with the Ministry of Health, which has a component of it. But
the specific ministry I think would be good. And again, I know that there have been a few very small movements, but it's just not enough. So
fair enough. Thanks, Councillor Moore. I appreciate that. And you'll have to turn your mic off. I don't have that power anymore, but Councillor Cole Hamilton.
Thanks very much, Mayor. And I agree with all of the suggestions so far. And I was going to add one more thing to the possible meeting with the Minister of Housing, EB. We have a resolution to UBC this year that the provincial government consult with local governments when planning new housing and facilities to support homeless people. And I'd like just have that added into whatever briefing we send when we get that meeting set up.
Thanks so much. I appreciate that, Councillor Paul Hamilton. And I believe I don't see any of the lights there. So I think it's been a pretty fulsome discussion. So based on that list, it is a pretty pretty comprehensive list. I'm not sure how many ministries we left out. But one thing I do just want to recognize is staff taking a very focused look of making sure, not just through these meetings, but just a concerted effort that if there's ability to apply for grants, that we're actually also applying the political pressure and setting up meetings with those ministries. Mr. Garbutt.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just would say we do have a motion coming, so that would be in addition. Should you direct staff, that would be in addition to this list. So thank you.
No, fair enough. Okay, so I think that's it for right now. And again, these deadlines, some of them are coming up in about a week. Mr. Garbutt? Anybody? All right. So with that, I don't know that there's been a motion necessarily for receipt. So anybody opposed to receipt? Seeing none, that passes unanimously. And then we have a list. So if somebody would like to move that list as discussed. Councillor Frisch.
Sure, I'll move the list as discussed, and I assume the CEO has written that down. So, thanks.
Second.
All right. And if it's not written down, I'm sure it's recorded somewhere.
That's a good point.
so that's awesome. All right. And again, all those in favor? Anybody opposed? And that passes unanimously. Excellent. Okay, so that was Sophie. And that, so next we have the briefing note for the 6th Street multi-use active transportation bridge.
Move receipt.
Okay. Yep. I'll second it.
Seconded receipt, and we'll pass it over to Mr. Garbutt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Davidson's here to speak to this extremely important project that's been a priority of council, and I think there's been some great effort.
Thank you, Jeff. Through the CAO to Mayor and Council. With this briefing note, staff are recommending to request a meeting with the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure to lobby for support for the 6th Street Bridge at the upcoming UBCM convention. The 6th Street Bridge multi-use active transportation bridge would provide a dedicated cycling and pedestrian connection between downtown Courtenay and Sims Millennium Park. The 6th Street multi-use active transportation bridge has been identified as a strategic priority by Council, and the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure's Transportation Policy and Programs Department is responsible for active transportation grant programs, which are the grant programs we would target for the 6th Street Bridge. With that, I'm happy to take any questions if there are any.
Councillor Frisch.
Oh yeah, well, I was actually just going to move the motion, but we're on receipt, so if you want to dispense with it, I'll go ahead.
I don't see any other questions or comments coming up. So, Councillor Hillian, did you have a?
Look at my leg.
Yeah, sorry.
Thanks, Mayor. I really appreciate staff bringing this forward. This is a decision that council took in the last couple of years, and although there's some controversy in the community about whether we have the resources to do this, I think there's also strong support for this project has been demonstrated over several councils. But I believe it's really important that we look for as much in the way of grant funding as possible, so that any borrowing we do is quite limited. And I really want to acknowledge and appreciate staff for bringing this forward. Thank you.
Thanks for that. And anybody opposed to receipt? Seeing none, that passes unanimously. Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I was also going to point out, I don't know that it was in the briefing note, but this is an important piece to active transportation between East Courtenay and West Courtenay. And, you know, right now we're really hemmed in with our current bridge. And so I'm also really excited to see this come forward, and thank staff for all the hard work on it. And with that, I'll move that based on the, I'm sorry, have I got the right one? No, that's the background. Hold on a second before I jump on the wrong ones. Yes, I do. Thanks. Well, you didn't give me the actual motion.
Didn't I thought it was right now. First page. Sorry about
That's
that.
all right. Is it just receipt? We don't have a motion.
And the motion,
Well, there we go.
if I could,
Yes.
would be direct staff to set up it's the second line, support a potential meeting with the Ministry of Transportation Infrastructure at the 2021 to discuss the project and funding opportunities.
So moved.
Excellent. Thank you, Councillor Frisch. Did that get seconded? Seconded by Councillor Cole-Hamilton and Moran, everybody's awesome. All right. We've had a bit of discussion around it and thanks for the clarity. Any further questions or comments? Seeing none. Anybody opposed to this? Excellent. That passes unanimously. Thanks very much. And next we go into reports and updates from council. And we'll start with Councillor Cole-Hamilton.
Nothing particular this week.
Okay, Councillor Frisch. No thanks. Councillor Hillian.
Thank you, Mayor. I will acknowledge one meeting that took place, and this actually bears direct relevance to the earlier discussion about requests to meet with government members at the UBCM. We did meet with Minister Eby on June 17th, Mr. Garbutt, the mayor, and myself, and this was a meeting that included representatives of BC Housing, and it was a follow-up to the meeting that with Minister Eby that took place with the leadership of the Coalition to End Homelessness back in May. So he certainly has heard loud and clear from this community about our concerns, both with the lack of housing and with the social disorder that many of our citizens are experiencing, both those who live unsheltered and those who are impacted by different activities that results in. So we heard from the minister an acknowledgement of the concern. He has heard it from other communities around the province, but he's very aware of what we're dealing with here. And he has advised that the province is developing a homelessness strategy that will move away from the temporary measures that we've experienced during the pandemic, many of which we're familiar with, one of which is down the street from us as we speak, to permanent solutions. And part of that involves a complex care housing initiative that will be going to Treasury Board for approval in the fall, according to Minister Eby. He did express that there is a sense of urgency on the part of the province, and of course, as we know, large-scale projects take longer to implement than they do to announce. But at the very least, we do have that undertaking that this work is underway, and we made 3 specific asks of the minister at that meeting that we'll be following up with a formal letter shortly. And the first of those asks was that we need a purpose-built shelter in this community that would give us additional shelter spaces in a part of town that does not involve the sort of challenges that we've experienced where we, in the 2 locations we currently have. There's been long a desire, which is actually supported by the current operators, to get out of the residential neighborhood that the shelter is in. And so we've made that specific ask. Of course, we don't know whether we're going to be successful with that. We've also specifically asked at that meeting for an additional supportive housing project to be built as soon as possible to address the unhoused people who require that level of support. And my understanding is that the minister or the BC Housing representatives have been meeting with staff to discuss potential sites in the community. And the third request that we made was for solutions to our ongoing need for permanent housing for so many of our residents. So we put those things on the table very clearly, and I think we've had a receptive ear. We'll see how fast the government can respond. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks, Councillor Hillian, and really thanks for all the time and energy you've put in into this. Not just on behalf of the city, but even with the Homeless Coalition and working again with multiple meetings to push these measures forward. And Councillor McCollum and Councillor Moran.
Great, thanks, Mayor. I know we chatted about trying to keep our reports brief, but I did have the pleasure of watching a town of Comox meeting the other night. And I noticed that their regional district reps do report on regional district activities, and I thought that there were a couple things that I would mention. The first one being some information update on the water treatment plant, which I'm the chair of the water committee now. And actually the day after tomorrow, we're actually going to have water start to flow from the new intake at Comox Lake into coming out of the taps in Comox Valley Homes. And that process will take a while to kind of cover the whole valley, but folks will notice some changes in the temperature of the water. It'll probably be colder, but the water quality will be instantly improved as soon as that reaches the home. So that's really great news. And the system will be fully operational by mid-August, and some other neat things connected to the water treatment plant. There's a great trail system up there, as many people know, along the river, and there have been some upgrades to the trailhead as part of this project. There will be an outhouse or outhouses, parking, some signage around the history of the area, First Nations history, as well as the Bevan town site that was up there. And there will be hopefully an in-person type of celebration this fall. So I just wanted to give that update around the water treatment plant, because perhaps everybody doesn't follow what's happening with the regional district. We also had a wonderful, I think, a great waste management meeting where we had representatives talking about dealing with construction waste, but I'll leave it to maybe one of my other colleagues on the regional board to talk about that, so I don't go on and on. But it was I thought a really, really good presentation about how we can reduce our construction waste and actually put it to great use, and use that circular economy idea. So that's about it for me. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Councillor Moran. And I did actually have a conversation with Councillor Cole Hamilton last week about that exact topic. So that's great. And Councillor Theos?
Yeah, nothing for this week, Mayor.
Excellent. And no, much appreciated. And again, a great meeting with BC Housing. I think obviously much more work to be done. But certainly still appreciating the fact that in the last 3 years, we've probably seen more progress than we have in the last few decades. So really want to acknowledge that, but know that there is so much more that needs to be done. And beyond that, today we did have the flag raising for Indigenous Peoples Day. So thanks to the councillors who came for that. Really appreciate it. Just show the support. And at the request of Donna Mitchell, the elder that gave the blessing today, they did request that we keep it at half-mast. Just in recognition of the mass grave site that was found in Canada. So, and really the feelings that First Nations are going through across the nation right now in terms of dealing with this information. So, and with that's all I have. Thanks for everybody's updates, and we do have some resolutions of council, and I'll start with Councillor Hilly.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll move that whereas on June 12, 2017, Courtenay City Council unanimously approved support in principle for a land partnership with Comox First Nation and Project Watershed to facilitate the restoration of the Couscoussum lands based on Indigenous reconciliation and the significant aesthetic, recreational, environmental, and economic benefit to the city in the form of flood mitigation, green space, and restored fish habitat. And whereas Courtenay City Council also agreed to support the fundraising campaign towards purchase of the lands by approving grant funding to cover municipal taxation during the period of the Project Watershed lease starting in fiscal year 2018. And whereas the fundraising campaign has been successful with title to the Couscoussum lands now held by Project Watershed, pending Comox First Nation and the city of Courtenay assuming ownership or co-ownership. Therefore, be it resolved that council approved payment of grant Project Watershed from current gaming funds in the amount of $68,761.26. Said amount to be applied to the current property taxes on the Couscoussum lands located at 1901 Comox Road. And be it further resolved that the Couscousin property be added to the list of permissive tax exemptions for the application of 100% exemption effective in all future years.
Second.
And if I could just briefly speak to this, Mr. Mayor, the hope had been that we would have this ownership issue resolved in time to apply for tax exemptions this year, but the process of exempting municipal lands from taxation takes a longer lead up period, and unfortunately the title transfer did not take place in time to allow that. So this would be the last year that we would be looking through this if in fact staff can move forward with the exemption resolution. It would come from gaming funds, and therefore I believe according to our finance director, we have the resources there to make that happen. And the organization, of course, would very much appreciate this, so that the money that they're raising to both to pay for the land and also to now conduct the restoration, which is going to be starting to take effect with the removal of concrete in the next few weeks, doesn't have to be paid out of those funds. So essentially, this is a further contribution to the restoration of the property on behalf of the city and the benefits that we'll gain from that. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Hinman. Appreciate that. And I don't see any questions or comments regarding it. So all those in favor? Any opposed? And that passes. And we do have a in-camera motion.
I can move this now.
Councillor Courtenay can
Already
beat you by
so
that
much happened, but I got it now. All right. All right, have a glass of water afterwards. So move that a special in-camera motion closed to the public will be held June 21st, 2021 at the conclusion of the regular council meeting pursuing the following subsections of the community charter. 90 sub 1 sub C, labor relations or other employee relations. 91G, litigation or potential litigation affecting the municipality. 91J, information that is prohibited or information that if it were presented in a document would be prohibited from disclosure under section 21 of the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. 91K, negotiations and related discussions respecting the proposed provision of municipal service that are at their preliminary stages, and that in the view of the council could reasonably be expected to harm the interests of the municipality if they're held public. And 92B, the consideration of information received and held in confidence relating to negotiations between the municipality and a provincial government or the federal government or both, or between a provincial government or the federal government or both and a third party.
Second.
Excellent. Any questions or comments? All those in favor? Anybody opposed? That's unanimous. Great job, Councillor Hamilton. And finally, notice of motion, which will be mine. Basically, that for a full service hospital for Central and North Island, that's the Nanaimo Regional General Hospital. So the regional district of Nanaimo has already passed this, as well as many other municipalities south of here. And so basically, where the city of Courtenay supports the March 9th, 2021 regional district resolution for full service hospital, be it resolved that the council direct staff to write a letter to the Honorable John Horgan, Premier, the Honorable Adrian Dix, Minister of Health, Senator Robson, Minister of Finance, requesting the province commit to a plan and time limit of 5 to 8 years for a new patient tower and diagnostic treatment center, including cardiac services and cardiac cath lab, and a new full service cancer center at the Nanaimo Regional District Hospital, and that we request a meeting with Honorable Adrian Dix, Josie Osborne, to speak to the necessity of the full service hospital in Nanaimo Regional General Hospital to better serve the medical needs of the Central and North Island community members. And just briefly, I do see this as something when we talk about the health and safety of our constituents. This is one of those things that really lands directly there. And having specialists talk about that magic hour where people are having to get that treatment when they've had a heart attack and having to either get what they would consider subpar treatment north of Victoria or have to travel to Victoria for that full service treatment is problematic. One of the other reasons for being asking for these meetings is that also so that we have a voice at the table, and this is something that I've already talked to some of the other leaders north of Nanaimo, and we'll actually ask our reps at the regional district to take to the hospital board as well, so that that our hospital board actually is part of that conversation as well. Because if they do provide those services, there may be some financial implications, and those should result in us having a voice at those tables, both here but also at that larger hospital board. Sorry, Councillor Hillian.
Well, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I was going to raise a point of order that it sounded like we were actually debating the motion.
Oh,
but
sure.
But I acknowledge that it's just a notice of motion, but I will give notice that I will be asking why we wouldn't be referring this to our local hospital board for discussion prior to dealing with it as council, and perhaps that will be explained more fully when we deal with it.
Yep.
Thanks.
Yeah, it'll be part of the motion for sure, and mainly it's just other municipalities like Ladysmith, et cetera, have also done their own motion, so it's sort of in keeping with what else is happening. But I probably already said too much.
No, impossible.
All right. Thanks for indulging me. With that, we have one last thing.
Yeah, thanks. I would like to move that whereas the Federation of Canadian Municipalities does important work through its standing committees and forums, in addition to work done by elected board members, and its bylaws and policies allow for up to 30 non-board members in good standing to be selected for standing committees and forums. And whereas Councillor Wendy Moran has expressed interest in applying to be appointed to the Committee for Increasing Women's Participation in Municipal Government, with the application deadline of June 25th. Therefore, be it resolved that the council authorize Councillor Moran to apply to sit on the committee, and if appointed, it approves the cost of attending meetings of FCM's Board of Directors out of councillors' activities budget.
Excellent, thanks so much. And I don't know that we need to speak to it too much, but maybe Councillor Moran, you might want to.
Yeah, just briefly. These things get in your email and then you think you have lots of time, and then I realized that the deadline was coming up this Friday. So that's why I asked for it to be put on as a late item. As many know, this is an important issue for me and many women. We've seen some fairly high profile women elected officials actually resign recently because of experiences that they've had. We certainly need more equity in leadership in all elected officials across the board. So I think it's an important committee, and we'll see how many people apply, and I don't know if I'll be successful, but I do appreciate the support of council. Thank you.
Fantastic. With that, Councillor Hillian.
Thanks, Mayor. I'd just like to offer a strong endorsement for Councillor Moran to take this step. I think that apart from demonstrating significant leadership in this area in our own community, and particularly in her work with young women, Councillor Moran brings a combination of idealism with common sense practicality that is quite unique, and I think she's well suited to take her place in a national debate with colleagues across the country on how to advance this important issue. So very pleased to support her.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Councillor Moran. Yeah. With that, all those in favor? Anybody opposed? And that's unanimous. Thank you so much, Councillor Moran, for putting your name forward. It is much, much appreciated. And with that, adjournment.